Okay, if you have your Bibles in your notes, I invite you to find them and find John chapter 6. John chapter 6, that's where we're going to hang out. And students, I promise you, we're going to get to recognizing you here in a little bit. I know some of this is going to be torture. This is a little example of what school is like, to sit in the front row and hear a long, boring lecture from a professor, okay? So this is a part of your preparation and training for the future. And for me too, because some of you just staring at me like you don't even want to be here. I get that. But so we're going to get to you in just a few minutes, okay? But before we get to recognizing our seniors, if you're new here, man, so glad you're here. We're in the 4th week of a message series we're calling Reasonable Doubt. We're kind of exploring some of the different doubts and struggles that people have when it comes to faith. And so far we've established 2 things. Everybody has doubts, even the most seasoned, committed believer in Jesus. Over the course of time, you'll have doubts, because doubts is nothing more than uncertainty. And everybody has faith. If you're here this morning to support a senior, and that's the only reason that you're here, maybe here for that and for the free coffee, we know you believe in something, even if you say you're not a believer. Maybe you believe in yourself. Maybe you believe in other system of beliefs, because everybody has doubts and everybody has faith in something. Now today, I would like to visit for a few moments about what happens when somebody's questions about faith are so big, their disappointments in God are so great, their experience in the church is so awful, they begin to think about walking away from it all. Walking away from God, walking away from church, walking away from Jesus, just kind of walking away, going to college and turning my back on everything I was taught, or going to work and just walk away from it. Because some of you students, you're about to go off on your own, be independent. You could consider and think about doing that. All the Pew Research says this is going on higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. Pew Research says that people who identify as Christian, who say, I am a Christian, has dropped over the past 10 years by 12%. And the people who would say they have no religious affiliation has actually gone up by 13%. Now that is when you go to sign up for something, you go to a company, you sign up for a job, or you go to a hospital, you go to something, they give you a form. And on this form, there's a place where it says your religious affiliation. Here's what they're saying. They're saying more people are checking off none than ever before. None, none, none. In other words, I'm done. A sociologist calls these people the dones. That is people who say, I'm done with faith. I'm done with going to church. I'm done with believing all this stuff. I'm done with what my parents taught me. I'm done, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. And it's a great fear I know a lot of parents have as they think about their kids going off into the world in the future. When I was growing up, I had a friend that he grew up in a Christian home. By the time he got to high school, he was very involved in youth. He was leading some of his peers coming to youth with him, leading them to Christ. He knew the Bible backwards and forwards, like I'm sure some of you do. And then he goes to college. And he gets into college and he starts reading and learning more things about church history and world history. And some of the things he was taught in church or by his parents wasn't matching up. And then he got to learn about some things going on in the life of the church, about in leadership and all these sort of, got a little cynical about that, kind of so political he thought. He said, you know what? I don't want anything to do with it. And one time he told me, I'm thinking about leaving the church. I'm not sure the church has anything for me. In college, I'm not sure that I'm going to stick with this, even this Jesus thing. Now, I got to tell you, that's something that really hits home with me, because now I am a grandfather, and I got 6 grandkids, about to have 6 that will be growing up and hopefully in the faith. And when they become your age, I'm hoping, man, they're solid and they don't walk away. But I know it's possible. And I know it hits home with some of you parents right now who have the fear of your child being exposed to so many things in the world that you don't have control over. Or maybe, some of you already have a relative who's walked away from it all. Maybe it's a brother, maybe it's a sister, maybe it's one of your own kids that's grown up and gone. Or maybe you yourself here this morning, you've already said, I'm done. You're only here to celebrate these kids, but you yourself have kind of checked out. You're just kind of going through the motions here this morning. If that is you, I'm really glad you're here. I'm hoping this short little time we have together before we have these young people walk across the stage that you find it worth your time and worth your while. But you need to know something. Jesus understood something about this. Jesus had some people who just totally walked away from him in John chapter 6. They said, I'm done. I'm done. In fact, he had former disciples. Jesus didn't have disciples. He had former disciples. This is from John 60, verse 66. We'll put it on the screen. It says, from this time, many of his disciples turned their back and they no longer followed Jesus. For whatever reason, they said, we're not going to follow you anymore. We're done. And I want you to know these were not a bunch of casual observers. These were not people in the crowd. They just kind of showed up to hear him talk a little bit and then move on their way. I didn't like what he said today, so I'm out. It was too shallow. I'm out of here. These were people that were serious followers and committed to Jesus. They left homes. They left their jobs. They left their family to go follow this guy. And this guy named Jesus maybe offered them forgiveness, and maybe he offered them healing. Some of them saw him walk on top of the water. Some of them saw him feed 5,000 plus people with just a little bit of loaves, a little bit of fishes, and these very same people said, I'm done. I'm finished. And the simple question I want to wrestle with for the few minutes we have here this morning is why? Why did that happen back then, and why does it continue to happen right now? Why do people just walk away from God and their faith and all that sort of thing and just say, I am done? Now, I believe there's probably a reason for every single person who's ever done that, even the people in this room, watching online down there in the sanctuary. And I know it's very personal and it runs very deep for some of you and some of your experiences that you've had. But I believe there are about 5 major broad reasons. In the minimal experience I have, 5 major reasons, broad, and I want to cover those as quickly as I can here this morning. And if you're a committed follower of Jesus, I ask you to please humble yourself and have an open mind, and do not dismiss any of these. Because I have learned over time one of the major reasons that people walk away from faith in the church is Christians on the inside of the church who dismiss some of the questions and the doubts and the struggles that people have who are trying to figure out what they really believe. So here we go. Stick with me. You're taking notes. And young people, I understand you. Not interested in this right now, but some of you parents, you might be. Because your kids may come home and they have a question, or they're doubting, or they're not sure. And I want to give you some information that can help you maybe engage in a meaningful conversation with them in the event of your kids are considering that. So here's the first one. The hard teaching of Jesus. The teaching of Jesus, sometimes it's just so hard that people just walk away. And that's what happened right here in John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, early in the text, Jesus had the audacity to say, I am the bread of life. He was comparing himself to the manna that fell down from heaven when they were being delivered out of Egypt. And then he has the audacity to say, nobody will experience eternal life unless they come through me. And so these disciples here, some of them who hear him saying this, back there in verse 60, they say, this is hard teaching. Who can accept it? See, so sometimes people walk away from Jesus just because his teaching is so hard. See, it's easy to follow someone who heals the sick. It's easy to follow someone who forgives the guilty. But what about someone who teaches something like this right here? Put this up on the screen from Matthew chapter 5. He says, if your eye causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. Hey, if your enemy takes your shirt, hand over your coat as well. That's hard teaching. It turns out you and I like our eyes. And we like to look at stuff. We like to fantasize. We like to dream. We like to indulge ourselves with our eyes. Who wants to stop doing that? I know, you know. So that's hard teaching. And it turns out our enemies. The only thing I want to give my enemy is not the shirt off my back. I just want to give them what they deserve. I want to make sure they pay. I want to make sure they get what's coming to them because of what they did to me. See, this is really hard teaching. And sometimes people walk away because the teaching of Jesus can be really, really hard. I mean, I want to listen to Jesus when he talks about forgiveness and sin and going to heaven. But what about when he talks about moral purity? What when he talks about money? What about when he talks about the poor, which he talks about a lot, and taking care of the poor? Oh, I don't want to believe in that stuff. I don't want to watch that stuff. See, it turns out many of us in this room, we are pick and choose Christians. We want to pick and choose what Jesus talks about to believe or not believe. But there's only one problem with that. He's not a pick and choose kind of rabbi. In fact, over in Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, the very last chapter of Matthew, he says, teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. And it's some hard stuff. What you need to understand is some people, they walk away just simply because the teaching is so challenging and so difficult. Here's the second one, the silence of God. When God doesn't answer, when you cry out to God and ask God to help, do something, God doesn't show up. or when God allows the worst atrocity to take place in your life that you didn't see coming. See, it's easy to walk away from God when you feel like God has already walked away from you. We're not going to spend any time here. This deserves a lot of time. We could talk about this a lot. 2 weeks ago, Chris Bohan did a fantastic job on a message about dealing with suffering and how God in the silence, what do you do with that when God is silent in the midst of your suffering? I would encourage you to go back and to wrestle with that. But I will tell you, this is a big deal in the church where people walk away when it feels like God is silent, that God has walked away from them. Here's the third reason I would suggest: the failure of churches. People see churches that are failing. They see these small little churches that they're kind of crumbling and falling apart, and they don't take care of them. The program is kind of weak. They go, oh, I want to be a part of that. It doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. Or churches where there is moral failure of some kind. There's some sort of scandal. There's some sort of abuse of money, the misuse of money. There's a cover-up of some kind. There's abuse of some kind. And I'm going to start talking about churches you read about in the news that are the global stage. I'm talking about little churches with little leaders all over the world that you don't hear about, where this stuff goes on a lot. And people walk out of those churches, and somehow young people, they have this idea that the church is systematically corrupt and you can't trust the church. And I will tell you that is not true. Because the majority of the churches in the world are filled with imperfect, faithful people, with imperfect, faithful leaders. I know that to be a fact. I know it to be true. In fact, over in Ukraine right now, there's a little church that was destroyed by Russia, a Russian bomb. And the pastor of that church was killed. The associate pastor's wife was greatly wounded and injured. The church was totally destroyed. And the only person left to care for the people of that little church was a woman named Lydia, the pastor's wife. She had no building, no money, no resources, no cell phone, no technology access. Instead of running and hiding with her own family to make sure her family was taken care of, she went looking for every member of that little church that her husband pastored, her name was Lydia, to make sure they were prayed over, they were cared for, they had water, and they had food. That is the church. Yes, I know there are cases, I hear the cases, of bully pulpits. A pastor is taking the Bible and weaponizing and politicizing the gospel, doing just horrific things to hurt people and just kind of bullying up. I know this is true because I've sat in this building with people who told me stories where they were church hurt, where the church has wounded them, where the church has ignored it. I know this is true, but the majority of the churches, that is not the case. Don't throw out the whole thing for just a little bit. But church, we need to understand that people are watching all the time. And sometimes how we handle our business turns people away or invites them in. Which leads us to the fourth one, and that is the hypocrisy of Christians. It turns out the failure of churches is mostly because of the hypocrisy of Christians who fail to practice what they say they believe. And if it's any encouragement, Jesus had a problem himself with hypocritical Christians. In fact, Jesus is the one who coined the phrase, you hypocrites, for religious leaders who would not do what they say they believed. In fact, in your notes, he invented the word. It comes from the Greek word hypokrites, which is the word for actor, which they use to tell a story with a mask on. Nothing got Jesus more riled up than hypocritical religious people who said one thing and did another. So if you're someone who's fed up with religious hypocrites, I will tell you you're in good company. Jesus felt the same way. Don't leave him. He felt the same way. And here's a very important point, young people. I want you to make sure you hear this. Hypocrisy is not just a Christian problem. Hypocrisy is a human problem. You will find hypocrites every single place that you go. You will find them in college. You will find them where you go to work. You will find them in every organization you will be a part of. Where there's a human being and a group of them, there's a chance that there will be hypocrisy. It is not a Christian problem. It is a human problem. A college, a university I will not name, It's a well-known university where a group of students discovered something. There was a group of professors in the philosophy and religion department who openly, outwardly called themselves Marxists. A Marxist is someone who is against anything systematic where wealth and power and access are limited to, they say, to a small group of people. And they just preached about it and beat up about it all the time. Till this group of students found out something. This group of professors were the highest paid tenured professors on the roll of the university. They made more money than the university president. They lived in luxurious homes in downtown, which I will not be named, and for spring break, they rented a yacht for their kind only, went down this river with an open bar for anybody who would want to come. They called those professors Neiman Marxists because they were hypocrites. You will find hypocrites wherever you go. And I would suggest the bigger the ideal, the bigger, the more pure and noble the cause, and the more people that are part of it, the greater the chances are you will find hypocrites in the middle of it. Because we all are sinful human beings, want to leverage situations for our own benefit, regardless of what we speak with our mouth to make ourselves look better and to feel better. And that's a big issue, church. That people turn away and they walk away from the church. And they say, if that's a Christian, I don't want anything of it. And that's just something for us all to be aware of. Here's the last one, and I want to spend just a few minutes here because this is so important. And that's number 5, the distortion of Christianity. Some people who are walking away from their faith are not walking away from Christianity. They're walking away of some version of Christianity that they need to walk away from. And some of you students will probably do that. Because in your growing up, in your family, you were taught a version of Christianity that really doesn't fully line up with the Bible. Some people were raised with a Christianity that was legalistic and moralistic. Some people were raised with a level of Christianity that was intellectually inadequate and unsophisticated in the little things they believe about this thing called the Bible. And then you grow up, you get out there in the world, you go, Some of you are raised in a home, perhaps, some of you grown-ups, where Jesus was either blue or red. A legalistic political thing, he's either a Republican or a Democrat. And then you go off to college, you get out in the world, and you read the Bible, and you study the man named Jesus. You go, when I look at the guy named Jesus, he's neither one. Something totally different. And so you go in the world, you get educated, you get more knowledge, you see the world, you go, you know what I've been taught in college and I'm learning in life, it doesn't match up with my childhood understanding of faith in God and church and all this sort of stuff. And you say, you know what, I think I'm going to deconstruct my faith. This happens all the time in college. This is something that's going on, parents. This is something going on for a while now in universities and in young people between the ages of 18 and 25. It's called deconstructing your faith. And sometimes I'm asked this question, do we believe in it? If you call deconstructing your faith as tearing apart your faith, getting cynical and negative and cantankerous and ornery, that sort of thing, I would say that's not helpful at all. In fact, it's counterproductive. But there is a deconstruction of your faith that is not only essential, it is vital to your well-being. In your notes, deconstructing faith, seeking to replace what is untrue with what is true. That is taking the wrong beliefs that got mixed into your right beliefs and correcting them and making things right. And Jesus did this all of the time with his disciples. He did it. We're going to put a passage on the screen from Matthew chapter 5. Put it up there. He says, you have heard that it was said. This is what you were taught. Love your neighbor, hate your enemy. Let me correct that, he says. I want you to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And he does this over and over in the scriptures. He says, you've been taught it one way. That is not the real way. That is not the truth. Such as many of the disciples, they believed that when Jesus came, he would come with a sword to overthrow Rome with power. And Jesus said, no. That's not how we're going to do it. We're going to do it with crosses. We're going to do it with sacrificial, self-giving love. Some of the disciples thought because they followed Jesus, they got to sit at the front of the table. They got privilege. He said, no, I got to correct that idea. You don't get privilege if you follow me. You get to wash people's feet and sit at the end of the table and park far away from the door and give up your chair for somebody else. That's what it means if you're going to be a follower of Jesus. See, there's so many things in the scriptures that you and I will give you a dose of reality that you and I got wrong. There's things we believe about God that are just not right. It's wrong. There are many things I believe about God that I know are wrong somewhere. In this church, it just is. There's some things about the Bible that you think you believe about the Bible. It's not based on the Bible. It's based on something your family taught you about the Bible. It's based on some perspective that some pastor taught you years ago, grown-ups, about the Bible. And they only focused on this little part and they left out all the other part. So as a result, you only know a little bit about God. You don't know the whole big picture. So you got to learn to understand and back up and deconstruct your faith to find out what's really true and what's not true, and realize that much of what you believe is incomplete. Maybe socially, it is intellectually inadequate. And when you find that, I want you to know it's okay. It really is okay. There was a guy by the name of N.T. Wright. He's a New Testament scholar. He's one of my favorite New Testament scholars. I read a lot of his stuff. You read any of his book, adults, I will tell you, you cannot go wrong in anything from Tom Wright, N.T. Wright. And he was asked one time about his faith journey, and I love this statement that he made. We're going to put it on the screen. I love this quote. He says, at least 10% of what I believe is probably wrong. The scary part is, I'm not always sure which 10% it is. That's as bad as honest as you can get. Can I say something? We need more of that in the church. We need more people who are committed followers of Jesus Christ who can say, I have the truth. I know what's right. You're all wrong. I got it right. And you just need to come on and agree with everything that I've said. We need more people who said, you know what? I'm still working out my last 10%. Just a little bit of humility to realize you don't know it all. You don't have the curb on everything that's truth and everything that's doctrinally right. And you're still trying to grow and to figure out your 10%. And let me give you some good news. The 10% that's wrong, that's not right, doesn't mean the other 9% is worth you, is not good. You got to throw it all away. It doesn't mean that at all. Just because you got 10% wrong, we all do. I promise you, we all do. Doesn't mean the other 9% is bad. Here's the way I'll illustrate that. 20 years ago, we moved into the house in which we now live. It was a brand new house on a lot that had to be kind of cleared out and whatever. And the very first night we're in this house, we're putting our youngest to bed, and we pull back the covers, and there was a scorpion in the bed in this brand new house. And my wife goes, she's sitting right here, we pull every sheet off every bed in the house. We wash every sheet. I mean, we're clean. We're on a scorpion hunt. We look everywhere in the house for scorpions. I have to go to Lowe's that night, paint the baseboards to kind of kill things if I could. We had a defogger, a bugger come out to kill the bugs up there in the attic the next day to fog it. And that night, my wife has a dream. And she has a dream there's scorpions everywhere in the house, coming out of the air conditioning vents. They're in the stove. They're in the refrigerator. They're in the toilet when you open up the lid. I mean, there's scorpions everywhere, and I got a blowtorch, and I'm just trying to blowtorch all the scorpions. I'm just, and everything. And she wakes up in the middle of the night and says, we got to move out of this house. I said, babe, we don't need to move out of the house. We just got to deal with the scorpions. And I will tell you, if you find a few bugs in your faith, and you will, don't throw out the whole faith. Just deal with the scorpions. Just deal with the bugs. Ask the questions. Dig deeper into the scripture. Have people help you to wrestle through, but don't you give it up at all. Jesus can handle your questions. Jesus can handle your doubts. All the time the disciples were asking questions. How many times should I forgive someone, Jesus? Who's the greatest in the kingdom, Jesus? What does that parable mean, Jesus? Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? I can imagine you just go, God, would you just shut up and stop asking all the questions? Any parents ever try to do it with your kids? Just stop asking me why. But Jesus doesn't do that. See, it turns out you can follow Jesus and ask questions. It turns out you can be a disciple and not have all the answers. And he says it's okay. In fact, the very disciples who decided to keep following him in John chapter 6, even when others thought it was hard, Jesus turns to them, and this is what he says to them. He says, you don't want to leave me too, do you? Are you guys going to leave too? And Simon turned to him and said, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know. Where should we go? I want to make you a promise. You asked the question, will my church fail me? Will some of my Christian friends fail me? Will my pastor fail me? I'm going to give you the answer. Yes, yes, and yes. Because if you expect perfection, you're never going to find it. Because we are all human beings, broken, sinful human beings. And perfect church doesn't exist. The perfect person doesn't exist. The perfect Christian doesn't exist. It's just all broken. It's all messed up. That's just the reality of the truth. But I tell you, you can trust Jesus to help you. You can trust. You just got to stay in the game. You can't quit. You can't leave. And I will ask you, where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to go? You going to go back to the bar? Go back to Instagram? Go back to high school? Go back to your sport? Go back to your team? You going to go backwards? Where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to go? How else are you going to solve all your problems? Who else? I will promise you, I've done the research. I'm 71 years of age. I'm almost dead. I've read almost every book out there. I will tell you, there is nobody on this earth like Jesus. I will tell you, nobody on this earth like Jesus. Nobody on this, where else are you going to go? There's nobody else like Jesus. Somebody asked me one time, Pastor, would you ever walk away from your faith? If they ever found his body, if they ever proved that he was not dead and rose back to death, then I would walk away because I chose the stupidest profession in the world. I should be doing something like you. What y'all are about to do, right? What am I doing here? But they haven't found his body. Where else are you going to go? He walked on water. Where else are you going to go? He raised people from the dead. Where else are you going to go? He healed people that were sick. Where else are you going to go? He healed dysfunctional families. Where else are you going to go? Except this guy named Jesus. And I will close out and finish with these two statements. Is that the goal is not to believe, have firm belief. The goal is to come to know God. The goal of faith is to know God. That's the goal. The goal is not to have this solid thing that you believe. I know this is true. The goal is to come to know God. That's the whole purpose of faith. It's not to have a doctrine that's perfectly figured out. Just like this. The goal of marriage is not to believe in marriage. The goal of marriage is to fully know and to fully love the person to whom you're married. Not to believe, I believe in the sanctity of marriage. I know a lot of folks who believe in the sanctity of marriage and they're miserable because they don't fully know and fully love the person to whom they're married. And the whole purpose of faith is to come to fully know and to fully know and fully love the God who created you and gives you a future full of hope and promise. So that means you keep asking questions. That's the only way to get to know him is you ask questions and you doubt and you wonder and you question, and you struggle and you wrestle and you keep coming back and you keep coming back and you keep on opening up this book right here called the Bible. You don't ignore it. You just keep on wrestling with it and you struggle with it and what you believe about the Bible, not what your parents believe, not what your pastor believes, not what some professor believes, not what some friend at college says, but what do you believe the Bible has to say? You got to decide that for yourself with a lot of help from a lot of people. But you got to come to an agreement. Hey, next week, if you're new here, come back next week. Next week, Memorial Day weekend, I will be here. Don't you take off. We're going to talk about doubts about the Bible. Why the reason people don't believe about the Bible and all that sort of thing. We're going to try to help you with that. And I will just give you a little hint. Next week, we're going to have a surprise worship leader that some of you are going to be really excited about. I'm not going to say any more, but we're going to have a surprise next weekend, so you want to be here for all that. But you got to stay in the Word. And most importantly, if you're going to deconstruct your faith, don't do it by yourself. We come to know Jesus in your notes. We come to find and know Jesus in community. Peter said, we have come to believe. Not I have come to believe. We have come to believe who you are. You cannot do it by yourself. And let me close with this statement. You know that college kid I told you about who grew up in high school, grew up in a Christian home, knew the Bible frontwards and backwards, went to college, thought about leaving the church and leaving their faith? That person was me. And then I discovered something. That God's grace and God's love had never left me, even when I thought about leaving him. Because there's a promise in the Bible where Jesus makes. It's in Hebrews. He said, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. And I just started thinking, if somebody would love me that much, when I thought about quitting them, but they would stick with me, that's enough to hang around and just kind of see what would happen. So I just hung around. And I would just say, I look at my life and I go, look what's happened because of Jesus. So right now I just pray over anyone in this room who can hear my voice online who's thinking about leaving him. Maybe you've already left. Maybe you're just here, just kind of going through the motions. I want you to hear something. Jesus gets it. He couldn't stand the hypocritical religious structures that failed him when he was in the church and the temple. On the cross, he experienced the silence of God. You may not be able to trust the church. You might be able to trust a pastor. You might be able to trust your parents, but I promise you, you can trust Jesus. You can trust Jesus. And so maybe just right now, you just kind of want to recommit to that or say that for the first time. Jesus, I'm going to trust you. And to those of you who are committed to Jesus, maybe you just need to make a promise to him right now that you're going to live your life that increases faith and not doubt by the way people watch you live. That young people, when you venture off to school, the people who see you, it will increase their faith and not increase their doubts. And maybe you just make a commitment. God, I believe, help my unbelief, that 10% that I got wrong. Just help me figure it out and to use me. God, we thank you for these young people. Just help us to honor them now as you lead them into the future that you have prepared for them. In Jesus' name.